Good morning. Nice to talk to you. I'm Miriah. If you have never interacted with me before, I'm sorry. You've been missing out. I do quite a lot of things. And I actually, TechTune reached out to me a couple months ago about speaking at a meetup. We met up with me on Gopher Slack. I was unavailable at that time, but we were able to arrange a time I could come speak, and I'm really glad to be able to share a little bit with you guys here today. Just to introduce myself a little bit, I mostly get my screen time these days on Twitch. I do stream mostly in Go, but I have been doing a little bit of Rust lately. I also run several meetups through a nonprofit called the Ford Foundation, which I'm a board member of. I also organize a conference. It is the Go West conference. The logo's behind me. This is the Go West conference logo. That will be taking place later in October. It's a hybrid conference, both online and virtual. I do have 2 dogs, and you can reach out to me on Twitter or GitHub or Twitch. These slides are available on GitHub. Well, they will be at the end of the talk. I just have to merge them into master. So they will be available on GitHub at the end of the talk. So you can click on all of these links. You can come hang out with me. All of the codes on GitHub. So you'll be able to see that. So just a little bit of background. Like I said, I organize several meetups through the Forge Foundation. We have them all here on the Meetup Pro page. And we usually do about 1 a week. So I was thinking, in the grand, as we're setting up websites and we're trying to be more efficient and use the internet, especially with COVID, now that we don't see each other as much, I wanted to be able to just keep a running list of these on our site. We use Hugo, so it's a static site, and I was just really wanted to just have a list of meetups just on that front page of the site. I had tried to use Meetup's API, but they locked me out. They said, no, you can't have our OAuth credentials. You'll never be able to use our API again. I tried for a year to get access to Meetup's API, and they said, no, you cannot have our access tokens. So I said, oh, okay, well, I can build a web scraper, and I can just scrape the information off the page. It's publicly available website. So that's what I did. I took probably about a month of once a week Twitch streams, and we set up a web scraper that would basically call that meetup page that I just showed you in there. It would parse the information off that file, and it would dump a list of the meetups and that attributes in Cloud Firestore. That's great. And it's wonderful. And as you can see, the data that it gave me was really nice, right? We have the name, we have a URL, it has a description, so I can have a full description. This one, unfortunately, was blank because I hadn't updated it yet, but I could have the lists of, I could have the speaker information, the description, put all of that right on the website page, and just have it automatically uploaded. Hugo has great tools for handling JSON, so it was really easy. It also allows you to put locations up there, right? So you could have your Meet link, your Zoom link, your video link, or the address just right up there. It was really nice and helpful. So yeah. And then what I decided to end up do after that, right, we have this web scraper running, is we wanted to automate it so that it would automatically get pulled and get saved. So that's what we're going to go into later. But first, I kind of just want to run through a little bit of this web scraper code, right? Just the simple Go app, right? It's a Golang-based app that will pull all of this lovely JSON information off of that meetup screen. So I'm going to go ahead and just dive right into that code. Where is, you were supposed to come up. VS Code. Oh, it's because it's not in VS Code. It's in Vim, because Vim is how I do things. So it's pretty simple. Right? Essentially, like I said, it's just a script that runs, that every time it runs, it pulls that JSON blob off of the page, parses it, and then stores it in a Cloud Firestore data store, JSON store. So it just, I have this run function that just lives right here in a main function, and it can be accessed by a port. So anytime I call this crawl port, it automatically will do the first thing. It will get the HTML attribute for that pro page. It'll then pull all of the URLs associated with that with those meetups that I have, and then it pulls the information for each of the meetups, right? So after that, we have this nice little meetup info that we just dump into Firestore. It runs pretty quickly. We can actually run it right here for you now. Pretty straightforward. You want to dive deeper into the code, like I said, it is all on my GitHub. You can look into it. You can look into how exactly I ran that Firestore stuff, and how I scraped the page. But it's just mainly supposed to be a simple Go server that we can hit and go run. Go run main.go, come on. That we can hit over an API. Go run main.go, that should be good. And then we should be able to curl. Oh, not that one. Nope. Am I already using that? I bet I am. I should have checked this. There we go. We'll just kill this real quick. Like I said, we're going to be using Docker later, just a Docker image later, so it should be fine. Let me make sure I can find the right curl that I want. That's a lot of the old ones. Nope, there it is. That's the one I want. So let's go ahead and run this. Set it up, go ahead and run. Okay, now it's listening on port 8080. And we'll adjust, right? So every time we want to trigger that web crawler, we just hit that endpoint. Oh, yes. We moved that, didn't we? I did move it. Oops. I did this on Twitch a long time ago. And I bet it is in dev. Nope, it's not there. Here's what we'll do. I have a better option. We'll just skip that. And in a minute, we'll just hit the curl on the GCP cluster. That's way better, way smarter. We'll just come back to that in a minute. Because obviously I moved some things around. But let's go ahead while we're here. We'll open up that Docker file. Because we're going to want to see this in a minute. So, back here. So, right, so we have the web scraper that runs. Unfortunately, I was not as prepared for the demo as I thought I was, because it's my bedtime, I guess. But it is on Twitch, right? You can go watch the YouTube videos or the Twitch videos and see it run locally. And we will hit it again in a minute. Right, so now that I have a script, right, that I can just run and I could just get this data. I want to be able to get it every week, right? If we have one meetup a week, then I should just be able to update it after that meetup occurs, and that list would be live. So if I could just run a job once every week, I would have live meetup data. So I wanted trying to figure out what the best way to do that was. In my head, I was like, you know what? I do Google Cloud stuff at work. I bet I could run a cron job on Google Cloud. That would store it really easy to Firestore. It would work really nice. So I went and I Googled cron jobs on Google. And it turns out there's a lot of ways to run cron jobs on GCP. Almost too many ways. There were too many options. The most common one was the App Engine cron. This was all over the place. Everyone's like, do the App Engine cron. It was in the Google documentation. It was in people's Medium blogs. It was just the most common, right? Basically, the idea is you would have something deployed to App Engine, and in the App Engine configs, you would actually configure a cron job on that. Another option, very popular, is using cloud functions, right? So you could have a function as a service that lives on Google Cloud that would run using the Google Cloud Scheduler, which is a second option or service provided by Google Cloud that is hosted, right? So the scheduler basically would keep track of your time, and when that timer runs up or the scheduler timer runs up, it would call the cloud function itself. The other option is the Cloud Run plus the scheduler. I couldn't find a logo for Cloud Run. It's a little play button, but they didn't have an updated logo for it. So Cloud Run is like functions. The difference is with Cloud Run is it's just a Docker image or a Docker container that runs on the scheduler, right? So you have a contained environment. So instead of just a function or just a script or whatever, you can actually add a little bit more complexity to that through the Docker image in that Cloud Run. And then the last one I found, which I've had to do for work, never personally, but I have done it on work, is running a Kubernetes cron job on GKE. I did not need a full Kubernetes deployment for this. I don't think I needed to use GKE. It was just one simple script, a super easy file. It seemed like way too much overhead. So I went ahead and I was like, okay, I want to use Cloud Run. It looked really easy. I could use Docker. I need more experience with I feel like everybody needs more experience with Docker, right? Like I use it at work all the time. But we always start with base images. We always start with things pre-configured. So I kind of wanted to just use Docker a little bit, use Cloud Run a little bit, test out that technology, leverage Firestore, test out that technology, and run that job using the scheduler. So I had to write a Docker file, right? So we ended up with a Docker image that looks pretty much just like this. We're using Alpine just because I like how slim Alpine is for a Linux build. We just run a directory, copy all our files on, run gomod download. We do need to make sure that the permissions get moved over. This part right here, where the copy and the chown equals root, that caught me up quite a bit. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that Firestore permissions. And then we build the scraper, run the scraper. It seems pretty simple. I can build that image and just have it live in the Google Cloud Registry. It's pretty simple. And that's actually, right? This is exactly what we have right here, that file. And it's pretty easy to build and to have that image. If I remember, right, you can just do a Docker build. That's a Docker stop. I forgot what that command was. I used it a lot. Oh, it's a gcloud command, right? So let's just do sgcloud and I'll remember it. The gcloud command. Oh, builds submit. That's what we got to do. So if we want to just update And I have these, again, I'll pop, it's right here. It's right, I have it right here. I have it literally right here on the slide. But we'll go ahead and we'll run it for you. So basically what we're doing is we're taking a build and we'll submit it to the Google Cloud Registry with this tag. And that updates it on the Cloud Registry and gives it a name so that I can reference that later. And as you can see here, we just run that submit, save it, and that has the web crawler name. So I can use that web crawler name to reference it later, which is the next step, right? The next step is we want to take that cloud image and we want to add it to Cloud Run, right? So that every time we call a Cloud Run instance, that gets hit, right? So Cloud Run, how Cloud Run works, Cloud Run has its Cloud Run API, right? Remember at the very beginning, I mentioned, let's go back here. You'll notice that we set up a server right here, right, with 2 endpoints on port 8080. We have a crawl endpoint and a health endpoint. So what the Cloud Run service does is it allows you, it exposes endpoints that you use to trigger certain actions, right? And that all is lives in that Docker image, and those endpoints are then exposed through that Cloud Run infrastructure and can be called through any set of credentials. Well, you have to use they can be public, but also through Google Cloud credentials. You can call them and they can run your stuff. So we have 2 endpoints up here that I have exposed through Cloud Run. We have the crawl endpoint that runs the crawler and the health check endpoint, which just makes sure it's alive. And just one more thing to notice about this, right? So what we're doing in this command is we're deploying our server, right, to Cloud Run using that Docker image. And so we're going to deploy that image to Cloud Run, referencing this image, and we're saying it's platform managed. I don't really, like I said, I wanted to keep it really simple. I didn't need any special configurations. I don't need to manage it. I just need to be able to access those endpoints. So let the platform handle it, let it take care of it, and run forward. And again, we need to expose these endpoints for Cloud Run to be able to work. So we have the health endpoint, we have the crawl endpoint, and that's how we trigger our Cloud Run events or builds. No, the Docker images on the Cloud Run events. I apologize. So yeah, let's go ahead. Let's just run it. Let's go ahead and have it go. I will find that for you so I don't have to click the button about 1,000 times. Cool. It was 6337. Right, so we're doing a curl to this web address. This is the public web address of my Cloud Run instance. But I do have an authorization token required for that. It uses the Google Cloud command line tool to receive that authorization through the auth client of that tool. And I'm just hitting that crawl endpoint there. So this will actually run. And it takes a little bit of a minute, not too much. But it just does a manual trigger on that instance. As we can see, it found 3 meetups. So, and that sounds about right. We have a Go meetup in August. a machine learning meetup in August, and a Kubernetes meetup in August. So that sounds about right. And then it saved those in Firestore, ran it just like I expected it to. But like I said, even though it's super easy to trigger locally, I don't necessarily want to have to go in and run this every single time. So like I said, we want to create a cron job. We want to create something that does this on a schedule automatically for me. Well, for us, for me and us and the entire situation. We'll say us. So to do that, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to use the cloud scheduler, right? So what that does is that basically keeps track of a schedule for me, right? And we'll just call the endpoint that I've set up on that certain schedule. So for this one, I have it set up. I'm just using the scheduler. I create a job that will be run over HTTP. I'm calling it test handler, and it runs every 5 minutes. It's a get method to an address using this service account. There are multiple options for doing scheduler. The two main ones you can do, if I remember correctly, you can do scheduler over PubSub, which is Google Cloud's event messaging bus. You can do it over gRPC or over HTTP. I love gRPC. It's literally my favorite. But we went ahead and just went with HTTP because we had that set up. It's super easy to hit a curl, and it runs quickly. This is just an example of how to set up the scheduler. You can also set it up through the UI. And what I ended up doing was I messed around with this a little bit, and I don't have it running every 5 minutes. I did end up just doing it once a week on Monday. I think it happens at 1 a.m. or something like that. And it just hits that endpoint, runs it, dumps it into CloudStore. And it's been working for about a month. I'm doing that really well. So I just want to talk just for a second about just a couple of speed bumps, I guess, that I ran into along the way. As you can see from that last slide, we'll just go back a minute. We had to create a service account for our web crawler. And so service accounts is how GCP manages their permissions on the cloud. Basically, you create an email with a unique ID that you associate to a deployment or an instance on the cloud, whether it be in GKE or App Engine or Scheduler or Run or the functions. Each one of those has a service account with an ID and email associated to it and a set of permissions. It took me a minute to figure out all of the permissions I needed for this, right? I had to have, I didn't necessarily want my stuff, the scheduler, to have admin permissions. I didn't want it to have edit permissions. It just needed to have just the one permission to run, to trigger a run. So it took me a minute, to research all of those permissions and figure out what I wanted. It made me super grateful for the SREs that I have at work that manage all of that for me. I don't have to think about it. But it was a good thing to learn and run through and kind of remind myself of going forward. So we were able to set up one for the web crawler scheduler, right? So that the scheduler did have permission to call that run instance, and then they authenticated through the IAM permissions. Click. The next one was Firebase. I thought that I could just magically get Firebase to also follow service accounts. I literally enabled every single service account, and I just couldn't figure it out. And there probably was a way to do it. But what I ended up doing was something that you saw previously in that Docker file. Locally, I had the Firestore Creds, right? My Firestore Creds for my Firestore project, I had been running locally. I had not ever tried to do the Google Cloud, the G Cloud auth for when I was adding to Firestore locally. I had always just done permissions through a JSON file that has my private key and etc. And so after trying to figure it out, I decided that the easiest thing to do was just add that key to the Docker image, which is one of the reasons why I'm super glad I was able to just put it on a Docker image and throw it up there and not have to stress or worry too much about having the right permissions and getting Firestore to work right. And I was at the point where I was giving my scheduler, not the cloud build, but well, I was giving the cloud build and the scheduler both Firestore admin permissions, and that just didn't seem right to me. But I was able to just add this file, and that just gave it the ability to upload right quick and not have any issues. The next thing is trying to find the logs on GCP. I am so used to just dealing with standard out when I'm doing small projects or working on my own, especially on Twitch. I don't really do a whole I did this whole project on live stream, and I was it took me a long time to figure out if my stuff was running, how it worked, what it was doing. I mean, how to query the logger stuff. And I was trying to run it, like trigger it on the cloud too, right? Turns out the easiest thing for me to do was one, create an endpoint just like this one, but that just said health, right? It was a lot easier for me to do this than it was for me to go look at the logs. And all this does is it tells me what's there and says we're alive. So it lists all of the files in there, tells me we're alive. I know I can hit it, and I'm working where. And I was able to put all of that back into my standard out and not have to go do a separate query on a log. And then just having the things up here, right, to check, also still printing in my standard out instead of running that curl. I was able to figure out that Google Logger and check failures. But for me personally, it's still kind of foreign. I really don't like looking at logs. I don't like loggers. I always prefer to debug over standard out. Obviously, there's more experience that needs to be gained there. And that last roadblock that I have listed on the slides is having the endpoints exposed. I didn't even think at the beginning about having a health endpoint up that I could just hit and make sure that my deploy ran or that it was deployed. But as soon I had a friend who had been also using the Cloud Run say, why don't you just add a health endpoint? And I was like, oh, well, that's dumb. Kubernetes does that all the time. They have that's super basic, right? Having that health endpoint. And that was really able to help me get it started, get that little bit of confidence, know that my stuff was running and that it worked really well. My watch Siri was running on my watch. It was recording this whole talk. Guess that's how Apple's going to learn all about GCP. So yeah. So just in summary, I know this was a little quick, but I would love just if you have any questions to shoot them my way. Really quick, it was like if I wasn't doing it on live stream and like trying to maintain all of that, it would have been super easy. Like it was really straightforward, building that Go app, adding it to Docker, uploading that Docker image to GCP, and then running it, right? It was really easy to do in Go. It was really easy to upload. It was really nice to have that container, right? Where I knew where all my files were, especially because I did add that permissions JSON file. Just to know that I had that container there. Everything was self-contained and running and accessible. And G-Cloud app made it really easy to create the schedule, to run it, and to, deploy. I didn't go into a couple of things here. I know I didn't do a super deep dive into the web crawler because I feel like, first of all, if you want to do a decent web scraper, you probably should use a more DOM-friendly language. Even JavaScript. I know I don't tend to recommend JavaScript, but you can use JavaScript for that. And I also didn't go much into Firestore. Just because I think I have a friend who's given a really good talk on that. And I think it's an entirely separate topic that could take an hour or two just to go into and explain, and to talk about really thoroughly. But running that simple Go script on the cloud with Cloud Run and Scheduler, it's really nice. It runs every week. It's been running for 2 months, and I don't even remember it anymore. It doesn't email me when it fails. It doesn't have any major issues. So I do have a link to that Firestore video at the end, as well as a link to any streams I had while I was going through this and testing it and debugging. Feel free to catch up with me on Twitch, on Twitter, or on YouTube. I am on those weekly, if not daily. That's where I do most of my Go. Most of my stuff is experimental. It's me learning how to be a better developer. And messing with tools I don't use, so you're not going to get a whole lot of best practices. You're going to get just mostly hacky stuff, but it's super fun, and it's a really good way to learn. And that's pretty much what I've got for you today.
Let me pull it up here. The first question from Sirin. So he was wondering if putting your creds.json inside the Docker is the best way to do it.
No, the best way to do it definitely would have been with your IAM permissions, right? But like I said, it's like I wasn't I didn't want to spend too much time on it, and after a 2-hour stream, I couldn't figure it out. I decided to just not worry about it. I do have the video that my friend did on Firestore, which I do have on the next slide, so you can get it on the GitHub. He did it with the IAM permissions, which is fine. But all of the information I was storing was publicly available. There's nothing sensitive in it, and there's really nothing to hack. So I was not too worried about the best practices in this endpoint, right? I don't have personal information. It's just the stuff that was available on that public endpoint. So I was just kind of it works. And, it's on GCP, and there is at least the minor authorization, bearer auth, that does have to take place to call it. So it's a little bit minimal, not best practice, but it worked for this.
Well, yeah. Is your image on GCP as well? Because that means the image is protected. Your image, your Docker image?
Yes, the Docker image, yes. Everything on GCP is encrypted while it's hosted, yes. So there is basic security around it, for sure, right? It wasn't the worst thing to do, but at the same time, it's also not the best thing to do.
Right. Yeah, we got another question from Sirin. So why did you choose to run a HTTP service and not simply a HTTP client script and save?
Mostly because I wanted to play with the tools, right? A lot of this reason that I designed the things the personal projects I choose and the way I build them is because I want to play with new technologies that I don't get to use much at work. I do a lot of GCP at work. I don't do a lot of HTTP at work. GRPC, excuse me. I do a lot of GRPC at work. I do a lot of NSQ. I do a lot of messaging and event stuff. I don't do a lot of HTTP. I've probably written 5 HTTP endpoint clients and 1 server in like 3 years. So I, stuff you need to do. I also wanted to mess with Firestore, and I really wanted to see how to run this cron job. And so HTTP and that stack was the best way for me to kind of use that skill set and learn that technology. I mean, if I was doing this for work, for like real production with real stuff, I probably would have done it very differently. But for learning, it was super nice.
Interesting. Yeah. Following up on that, actually, I saw that you mentioned, you've been using a lot of gRPC at work, and yeah, it's better for production environment. But I'm wondering, like, what are the trade-offs between choosing HTTP versus gRPC for your internal microservices?
Oh, just in general, personally, the reason why I would choose gRPC over HTTP is for the protobufs, for having that defined message format that's serialized, very small, which allows it to be done quicker. You're forced to have a schema. They're backwards compatible. The stuff that comes with protobuf, right? gRPC is just an RPC over HTTP2. So like on the back end, it doesn't save you much. But in the development and the fact that you are stuck in certain rigidities with the protobuf, it makes it really nice to communicate between teams and also scale across multiple services with those defined messaging contracts.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a bit chaotic if you only use HTTP.
Yeah. Yes. A little sometimes.
All right, let's switch it up a bit. So, how much does it cost you to run these GCP cron jobs?
Well, it runs once a week. And I don't know the conversion rate. I don't know if you guys know the conversion rate, but I have not been billed. I haven't even hit $5 yet. There is, I believe, with some of there are quite a few things available on the GCP free tier, right? Like the Firestore stuff that I'm running is all free because it's hasn't hit a certain threshold. And I believe Cloud Run lets you run like 100 times per month before it costs you anything. So I think I only have to pay for my Docker image storage. So it's very minimal what I'm paying. Like it hasn't even been $5 a month. I know a lot of people, when they start doing personal stuff on the cloud, they'll get huge bills and it kind of builds up fast. But I've been fortunate, right, in choosing the things that are on the free tier, right? That's probably another reason why I went with Cloud Run over Cloud Functions. Cloud Functions don't really have a free tier, while Cloud Run does have that. Oh, you can run X number of times before you have to pay. And that's, allows you to flex a skill without incurring a whole lot of pain in your pocketbook.
Yeah, that's why we all end up with the free tier skills.
Yes, free tier.
For the while, yeah. I've been using free stuff as well. Never pay a single dollar except for my domains.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what else we have in the chat. Okay. Yeah, we have someone came in and broadcasting about Shiba Inu and some other crypto coins. Yeah, maybe we can use these free stuff for mining cryptos.
Yeah, I think that's why they have a limit, right? You can only run X number of times, or else the people trying to mine their crypto are gonna abuse the system, right?
Yeah.
So just only, I don't know how much you would get after 100 runs. Probably not worth your time.
Yeah.
But
exactly. But yeah, hopefully we don't get too many of those. Then we're gonna be out of option for free tier.
Yeah, we need keep the free tier.
Yeah. Hinting at Google.
Yes.